Now a woman, having a flow of blood for 12 years, who had spent all her livelihood on physicians, and could not be healed by any, came from behind and touched the border of his garment, and immediately her flow of blood stopped. Reading from the book of Luke, chapter 8, verse 43 to 44. Welcome to On My Lunch Break with God, the podcast for those that like to spend their lunch break thinking about the goodness of God. Written by Alton Spooner. Thanks for joining. If you have been enjoying the podcast, then please follow and share it with a loved one. Today's episode concerns the hemorrhaging woman, as written in the book of Luke, chapter 8, starting at verse 43. Just like the hemorrhaging woman, for many modern believers, having bad health is taxing. Having bad health will exhaust your resources, your time, your money, your relationships, and your emotions. What's worse, finding a good health care provider can stress you out. And that stress, the stress from paying for perpetual health care related expenses, can affect your mental and spiritual well-being. However, what's tragic is that Christians with bad health may begin to think their illness is a punishment from God for something they have done in their past. Yet, this mindset by believers is negative and must be denied. So, as a case study for those who find themselves dispirited by bad health, the hemorrhaging woman is a perfect example of how to maintain faith, hope, and trust in God's grace during a long bout with an illness. So what is the key insight to remember about the hemorrhaging woman story in Mark's Gospel? The key insight to remember is that Mark uses this story to highlight Jesus' power. Jesus' power over life. Jesus' power to heal the human body. More insights to note is that this woman, the hemorrhaging woman who was tenacious in her faith, and she was poised in public. Furthermore, believers should read her story throughout the Gospels as a spiritual exercise, and to use this woman as a positive example of someone who exemplified strong faith despite being poor, in bad health, and a social outcast for a period of 12 years. But let's go deeper. Going deeper, why was this woman a social outcast? She was a social outcast due to the nature of her illness in relation to what was said about her condition in the law. The Mosaic law that was used to regulate a woman in her condition activities. Read Leviticus chapter 15, verse 19 to 30, to better understand that in addition to the physical pain of her illness, this woman also suffered the emotional anguish from being ritually unclean. Sadly, the most intense pain was the emotional pain that centered around her loneliness. Why loneliness? Because married life for her had to be extremely difficult. If she even was married, then by Mosaic law her bed was to be avoided. However, despite her troubles, this woman's brave disposition pushed her to leave her home. Being strong in faith, she ventured among the crowds despite any ridicule that she may have garnered in public and traveled to see Jesus. Moreover, as she drew near to Jesus, we can imagine most people would become anxious or begin to become ecstatic by yelling for Jesus. She did neither, but she remained poised. She was fully aware of her status as unclean and not to be touched by or to touch others by law. So, she humbly did not touch Jesus, but, touching the outer portion of his garment, or as Luke writes, she grabbed the tassel of his robe. In the book of Numbers, the tassel on the robe of an Israelite is described as serving as a visual reminder of Yahweh's covenant with the children of ancient Israel. See Numbers chapters 15, verse 37 to 41. And which I will read here. The Lord said to Moses, "Speak to the people of Israel, and tell them to make tassels on the corners of their garments throughout their generations, and to put a cord of blue on the tassel of each corner. And it shall be a tassel for you to look at, and remember all the commandments of the Lord, to do them, not to follow after your own heart and your own eyes, which you are inclined to whore after. So you shall remember and do all my commandments, and be holy to your God. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I am the Lord your God. Symbolically, the hemorrhaging woman's pull on Jesus' tassel, despite being a public and social outcast, is a good reminder for all Christians to hold on to God's word. Hold on to God's word despite your bad health. Hold on to God's word despite your social standing. Hold on to God's word despite negative circumstances, despite your poverty. Keep the faith that when you go to Jesus, when your faith is rooted in Him, then good things will come your way. Everything will work out for your good. If this message has blessed you, then please follow and share.